Teddy Roosevelt said this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So the people you will remember in your life are the people who touch your life the way Scott and Josh touched mine. They cared about me first. They learned about who I was and what I wanted, and then they created opportunities to fit that.
Aram Boyd has one of the most interesting and exciting journeys out of any guest I've ever had the privilege of interviewing, from being a jazz musician, a ski instructor, even one stint of his career, a nude model, to now teaching strategic leadership to some of the biggest companies in the world. Aram Boyd is a wealth of knowledge and fun stories that I'm so excited to introduce to you today. So without any further ado, Mr. Aram Boyd of Strategic Leadership and his new book, Working in Harmony.
I was never one of those people that knew exactly where I was going point to point to point. And my best friend knew he wanted to be a dentist. So when he went to school, he knew exactly what courses he wanted to take and where he was headed and what his life would be like. I had no idea other than I wanted to be a musician. I was a jazz performance major on trumpet when I first started college. But after a short while, I realized this is going to be a lousy way to make a living. It doesn't pay very well, and you have to be the best of the best to survive. Otherwise, it's hand to mouth. And my brother, who's a great musician, played his whole career, still playing today, has led a hand-to-mouth existence, because the top 5%, the top 10% live that treasured life, just like with actors and athletes and every other field of creative arts. So I knew my path had to be different, but I hadn't explored. And turns out I had all these other abilities and interests that I could have pursued, but I was focused on. So I dropped out of school. I moved to South Lake Tahoe. I was on Uncle Sam's ski team for a year, which is a euphemism for collecting unemployment and skiing. It's a tourist. And once winter comes, jobs are tough to find. Although it was because of that I got the greatest job I've ever, to this day, probably the best ever had. In those days, to collect unemployment, you had to go down to the office every week or two, and you had to submit a form, tell them where you look for work. And once winter hit, all the jobs dried up in town. And they had a job board, but there was only one job that was ever up there. And after about 6 visits, I finally said, what do I got to lose? Let's call that job. And that's how I became the nude model for the art class at the college.
No way.
Now, I was 20 years old. I had a full head of hair, and I didn't have all this other stuff on me. And I went down, I talked to the guy, and when I was young, when I left home, I had this motto that I'll try anything, because for no other reason, it'll give me stories to tell my grandchildren. I don't want to be that lonely old guy. I want to be the old guy that the kids gather around and listen to, right? So I went down there, and this guy had a great program going in this community college, which was housed in an old motel on Highway 50 in South Lake Tahoe. Now they have a beautiful campus off in the woods, spectacular campus. But yeah, I was on the ground floor of this motel, and he had a spectacular studio in there, and turned out to be a great job. But it was an adventure, and they could never they're supposed to have a male on Tuesdays and a female on Thursdays. And he had lots of women who would call, but they would never show up. They would always chicken out. So after a couple of months, I was the full time for the art class. If you step off that well-trodden path, you will find adventures, and in some cases, they'll suit your needs better, because that main thoroughfare, it's often for other people. It's not often for you, especially if you're a little more eclectic or interesting, or if you have a little more of a spark of creativity. most jobs and career paths are for people who follow instructions, people who are good at doing what they're told. I never excelled at that. I just did. And back in my day, it wasn't cool to do that. We didn't have the word entrepreneur in our vocabulary. We just didn't. My father's only advice to me on career was get a job with a big company and then stay there your whole career and collect a pension. That was the 1950s, 60s post-war model. Never worked for me. So this dropping out of college, moving to a town where I didn't know anyone, for the first time in my life, I got laid off. I didn't know what that was about, but then I stumbled onto this new career. And then another opportunity came up. I ended up in a movie. Fought for General Washington at Valley Forge as part of the Tennessee Volunteers, and a bad made-for-TV miniseries called The Rebels. It was based on a series of historical soap operas, but there was some big-name talent. Peter Graves, who was the guy from Mission Impossible, the TV show, he was General Washington. And Don Johnson, later of Miami Vice fame, this was his first big breakout. And they dressed us in rags, stuck us out in a blizzard for 4 days, and yelled at us to look cold. And it was a miserable experience. Well, I guess it was kind of fair because, they lied to us. They told us they would take good care of us. And we lied to them. We told them we could ride horses and we knew how to handle muskets. And we were just a bunch of employed ski bums. So I guess it worked. But in the cold prison, I met one of my lifelong best friends, and he was 25 years older than me. We became best friends, and we met on the set of that film. After 4 days of blizzards, dressed in rags, they ordered us all to the wardrobe truck. The sun broke out, storm ended. They dressed us in furs. Now you're sheep herders from Fort Ticonderoga bringing cannons to General Washington. Wait a minute, why couldn't we be in the furs when it was freaking snowing? And that's when we decided, that's it, we're out of this chicken outfit. And the next day we deserted the Army. We drove past Valley Forge site to ski resort, and we ended up skiing. But again, I never would have had that experience. And to this day, if you watch the movie The Rebels, you will see me in a scene with Don Johnson where I do exactly what they tell me not to do. I lift up my hat and I look directly at the camera. Darn it, I'm out here freezing and suffering for art. Anyway, after that year-long, I realized if I don't leave Tahoe now, I'll never leave. It's a beautiful place, but there's no industry. It's hard to have a career there. So I decided to go back to school, and I did. It was very successful going back. I was older than the other kids. I was more motivated. No one was paying my way, so I had to hustle, bag groceries during the day. I played in a club band at night, and I was doing well. And after that 1 year back, had a little more to go, and then I was going to transfer back to the Bay Area, try to get a business degree from Cal. And then I went to the job place center at the campus. I didn't want to bag groceries anymore. I was tired of a job where your pay was fixed. No matter how hard you worked or how good you were at your job, you wouldn't make any different money. And in the grocery store business, they knew I wasn't going to stick around. I was in college. So I was a bag boy and I was never going to get promoted. So I answered an ad that said, travel in the mountains, talk to homeowners about energy conservation. After my year in Tahoe, I was a nature boy, man. So that's perfect. So I called the guy up. I set up an interview. I go meet him, and he starts selling me on this opportunity where I can make as much money as I want, as much as my hustle and talent would allow me to make. And it all sounded great. And then I finally asked, okay, well, where's the part where I go in the mountains? And he said, well, actually, you could go to the mountains if you want, but the real money is in the bad neighborhoods. I took a job selling attic insulation door to door in ghettos and barrios on straight commission, which if that's what the ad said, no way I'm calling that ad.
Of
But it
course.
turned out to be the great opportunity for me because I could make as much money as I wanted. It was good for someone like me who was very outgoing. I was good with words. I was quick on my feet. And those were
Yeah.
skills that would get me in trouble in the grocery store, but it would make me a lot of money in the sales world. So for the first time, I made a step toward a career where my skills would translate. And the first day was crazy. I didn't know this at the time, but these two partners moved from LA up to Fresno, where I was going to school, to start this company. It was an existing program run by the utility company, and they were gearing up for the big program that was going to hit LA the following year. I didn't know any of this. So they hired me. I'm their first employee. Now, what are the odds of that? So I'm the first guy that walks in the door. So the first day I go out with them on a Saturday, I follow Scott around. I watch him make a sale. This guy's amazing. This guy had such charisma. When he asked people to do things, he did it. He had this quality about him, and he had this skill to talk to people in such a way to get them to go, well, yeah, that'd be in my self-interest. Okay. And next thing you know, he's climbing in their attic. He's measuring insulation. We're at their kitchen table. He's explaining the benefits. They're signing the contract. We walk out the door, and he was so smart with me. I go, wow, that was amazing. And I say, you know what the amazing part is? He pulls out his calculator, because back in those days, we didn't have phones. Pulls out his calculator. He says, guess how much money you would have just made? He showed him $120. Now, this is 1978. $120, it's like $300-$400 today. And for a young kid in college making that kind of money, and dang, that was
Yeah, for
That's
how
20,
much
30
time
minutes.
did you even spend inside the house?
15, 20 minutes. And
There you go.
I spent an hour with him altogether, and he made that. Then I traded off and went with his partner. Now, his partner didn't have that thing. His partner was the operations. But, he knew the business. So we were going around, and we get to a house, and the woman says, oh, no inglés. No habla inglés. So, okay, sorry. He turns to leave. Well, in California, you have to take a foreign language in school, starting in intermediate school. They call it middle school. I had 2 years of 8th grade Spanish. So I tried. And next thing you know, I'm in the house, in the attic, at the kitchen table. I recruited her 8-year-old son to help me with the hard part. I closed my first deal in Spanish.
No, your first
So-
one.
The very first one. And we walk out the door, and the other guy, Jim's going, man, you're a natural. And then when we hook back up with Scott, he's going, you wouldn't believe what he just did. The next day I was on my own. The week after that, I'm training the new guys they hired. So all summer,
No way.
I'm going out there and I'm selling. I'm making more money than I've ever seen in my life. And every day they're sending out a new guy with me, which put a lot of pressure on me. Selling is a lot about rejection and failure. And it's kind of like baseball. Best players fail 2/3, 3/4 of the time. And sales is the same way. Most of the time, you don't close the deal, and you'll get a closing ratio. And depending on what you're selling and how expensive it is, but you don't sell everybody. You have to get comfortable with people telling you no all the time. And when I would go out selling insulation, I might go to 20 or 30 homes to make one sale, but it was worth it. Sometimes I would go to 7 homes and close 3 of them. You never know. But I got really good at having a trainee with me, showing them the ropes and getting them started. And after a while, I realized, I kind of like doing that better than just the selling part. I like helping the person. I like showing them and then having them do it, critiquing them. And I didn't know it at the time, but I'd found my career path. I had no idea. And again, it was all accidental. There was a little curve in the path, and I was in a new spot and it suited my skills and my temper. But it would take a decade or two to get myself into that field, because at that point, there was no career path for training. You could not get a degree in training. Their universities didn't have certification programs. The only way to really get into training would be to be inside of a company. And then after time, you could get promoted to be a product trainer or something like that.
Sure.
In fact, I met a trainer during that time with the insulation business. We bought our insulation from this one manufacturer, and they would send a guy out to teach us how to sell the benefits of their insulation. I saw that guy and I go, man, that job is way better than selling the insulation. I'd like a job like
sure.
that. But it'd be years before I found something like that.
Wow.
Anyway, I
Thinking
built
back,
5
I'm just curious. How long did it take you to realize that you actually really enjoyed the training piece of the puzzle more than the selling?
Well, within that first year, because selling of any kind, there's a grind to it, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of rejection. And you quickly realize I have to get better at working with people. I have to get better at influencing them. I have to get better at identifying good prospects and then moving on if they're not good prospects. Otherwise, staying in that rejection zone is painful. It's uncomfortable.
That's super.
And even the best, most successful salespeople, they might get to where they don't mind it, but nobody likes that. Who likes being told no? And when you're selling attic insulation on straight commission, door to door in ghettos and barrios, the no usually comes with a slamming door and some Dobermans chasing you out the front yard. It's a little more in your face than corporate selling. So I figured that out.
Yeah, I actually did door-to-door sales also. That was my first job.
So,
I was selling cell phone services, cell phone plans, door to door, but business to business. And I tell everybody that it was the worst job I ever had that I learned the very most in. Would you recommend people go do door to door sales?
well, yes and no. Depends on who you are. For some people, it will absolutely crush you and you won't be able to get out of bed. So it will damage you. Don't do it. But for other people, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to make a lot of money, if you want to do things that other people can't do, there is no better preparation for an assertive life in business than selling. Sales skills are the fundamental skills involving people that will get you places in business. It's how you get a job. It's how you get a raise. It's how you make more money. It's how you go out on your own and launch a venture. You need those skills. So the skills I started developing when I was 21 years old on a porch in Compton. Yes, I worked Compton for 6 weeks. I sold 17 houses on one street in Compton. I learned also how I developed an awareness that you don't get in a regular job where you do what you're told. You're out in an environment where you could be really successful or you can run across some real hazards. And I learned how to blend into the neighborhood, how to behave in a way so I wasn't perceived as a threat. And I would walk up and get people to allow me into their home and sign a contract with a utility company. That's kind of asking a lot of person that you've just met. So that requires a lot of skill, a lot of personal awareness, a lot of tact and diplomacy. And what's the word I can use on your podcast? A lot of chutzpah.
Chutzpah. A lot of chutzpah. Cojones.
Yes. But that's the quality you need if you're going to go out and create something. Now, I know a lot in our world is designed around the introvert's mindset, that I can use coding to create these things and I can create a product or a tool or a service and I don't have to interact with people. Well, that can work for some people, but usually it requires a skill set of a person who can go out and influence a group of other people, a group of VC capitalists, a group of people to come and join this crusade and work like dogs for 60, 70 hours because, well, we get to play ping pong at lunch and have free beer at the end of the day. And maybe we'll get stock options if this thing takes off. You need a certain skill set to get people to surround you and help push you to achieve those things. And not everyone's cut out for that. But if that's where if that's what you dream of, do it. Because you're either going to find out real quick, you're not built for that, go do something else. Or, okay, this is the first step and this is my foundation. Because after that, I did that for 2 years. After the first summer, Scott and Jim pulled me aside. I learned so much from this guy, Scott. He just was so good at influence and at charisma. He had this animal magnetism that you wanted to be around him because he was so smart. He didn't tell you what to do. He asked you. He asked you lots of questions. And then when he would give you an answer, he would put it in terms that were meaningful to you. So in my first interview with him, he didn't blurt out, oh yeah, you're going to work door to door in nasty neighborhoods and you only get paid if you close deal. He learned that I wanted to be a jazz trumpet player and that's why I wanted money. I wanted money for the freedom it would give me to pursue this other thing. So everything he told me about the job, he put into terms of, well, this is how you'll be able to just work in the afternoons and then your nights are free for you to keep playing in clubs. And you'll be able to make so much money, you'll be able to buy a better horn. You'll be able to do this. You'll be able to do that. He quickly figured out what my why was. And then he fed it back to me, everything about the job, all the distasteful elements of this job. He sugared them up for me because he put it in terms of what my dream was. So at the end of a 1-hour interview, I was excited to join up to work door to door in the summer in Fresno, California, where it's usually 108 degrees, talk to strangers in terrible neighborhoods and get them to convince them to buy something from me on straight commission.
Wow.
And you know what?
Wow.
It was the greatest thing I could have done. So I did that at the end of the summer.
Man,
they pulled me
Aram, let me ask
aside.
you if I can cut you off. I'm sorry. You know, so Scott showed you at that time what you didn't know was essentially behavioral science, right? He pulled
He's
out
in chapter 1 of this book.
Working in Harmony. We'll talk about it here in a second, your book, which I mentioned to you, I'm like halfway through, and it's just, I love your story so much, which is why we're here today. But no, so Scott figured out your why, and he started to influence you uniquely, right? What was most important to you, and that is sort of what behavioral science is. What do you think is the number one thing that entrepreneurs and leaders get wrong actually about influence and about sales?
Well, it's that very term. In fact, in leadership training, we call it the WIFI, or what's in it for you. Most people, most of the time, will act in their own self-interest. So when you're trying to get someone to do something, you don't convince them to do it because it's going to help you for some reason. You convince them to do it by showing them how it's going to help them. And in order to do that, you have to know them. What are they in it for? What do they want out of this? What are they aspiring to? So you show them how success in this moment with this task, this is going to help you achieve what you're looking for. And he was a master at that. And at the end of that first summer, the two of them pulled me aside and they said, "You've been great. You help us train all these guys. Let us tell you why we're really here." And then they had a wall map of the LA basin. And they told me all about the LA program. And they said, "You come with us, within a year, you'll be running your own office. And then you could play 6 nights a week in a club if you want. And you're going to make so much money. What do you say? You in?" And the last thing I ever wanted to do was move to LA. I wanted to go back up to the Bay Area, go to University of California. I signed a piece of paper turning down a scholarship and a grant. I dropped out of college again. And I moved to LA with them. And sure enough, I was running the San Diego office a year later. I'd moved 5 times in 2.5 years. It was a tremendous education.
This is so interesting to me that through influence again, right? Scott now has convinced you to not just keep working with him, to not just move to a city that you never wanted to be in, but to also drop out of college. That you mentioned your dad, your whole life, grilled you, education, work for a big corporate company for the rest of your life. Now you're making this huge, huge, huge pivot, right? And you were at this time learning from doers versus now learning from classic formal education.
This is a huge point right here. In selling, you buy an emotion, but you justify your purchase with logic. So the logic I used to justify dropping out was that very reason. I'm going to community college and I'm learning business from people who've never run a business. I'm doing business with these 2 guys. I'm learning more than I'll ever learn, and I can always go back to school. That was my logical justification. But the emotional reason, Scott valued. I'd had 4 or 5 jobs up until that point. None of those bosses ever cared about what my interests were. All they cared was I followed the rules and punched the time. They could give crap about me. Scott got into my head because he truly cared who I was as a person, and by me succeeding in life, he was going to get everything he needed and wanted from me. And he made me feel good about myself all along the way. The kind of validation that most of us never get in our jobs. So that's what I got from being there. And that's why I wanted to follow this guy. He made me feel good about myself. I was making all kinds of money. I was having adventures, and I saw a future until the day it ended. Our whole business model was based on these programs set up by the utility companies in California. PG&E financed everything we did. They paid us. The customers paid PG&E back. And later, LA was Southern California Gas Company. In San Diego was San Diego Gas and Electric. Well, then one day, Jimmy Carter left office. Reagan came in. That was the end of that. Our program ended, and I'll never forget the call with Scott. And there I was in San Diego with no work. So I wanted to stay in sales. I knew it was going to work for me, but I wanted something different. Door to door was brutal. And this was one-to-one selling. Well, then an opportunity came up, and again, I had no idea what the opportunity was because it was an ad, just like the first thing. Because in those days, that's how you got people. There was no internet.
Yeah.
So there's an ad that said travel the country, selling and promoting a nationally known educational program on college campuses. See the country, that'd be great. Nationally known, that'd be great. So I called the guy. He wouldn't tell me what it was. He'd come for the presentation. And then if you liked it and believed in it, then you would find it. So I went to what turned out to be the free introductory lesson for the Evelyn Wood speed reading program, which back in the late 70s, 80s was huge in America. They advertised on the radio all the time. It was so popular that Cheech and Chong did a parody of it on one of their early albums. My job would be to fly to a city, go to a college campus for a week, do 15 presentations over the course of that week, sell these kids on buying the speed reading program, and then package it all up for the instructor who would come in and teach the course, fly onto the next campus and do it again.
You were selling to college kids?
College students who had to call their parents to get the money for a very expensive $600 speed reading course. And this is 1980, $600 was a lot of money. But this guy, John, he was like Scott, but completely different. He had a way of just mesmerizing you with his voice and with his words. And he did a similar thing by showing you what was in it for you. If you could follow his plan, and he knew exactly how to do it because he had been the top salesman in the country. If you just followed his instructions, you too could be out there doing this. You get to go to all these college campuses. You're going to meet all kinds of people, and you're going to make $1,000 a week or more, which again was a lot of money back then. So the interview was the free introductory lesson that we would be doing, where you actually teach them a little bit of speed reading. And he had us do this one drill, and my eyes opened up, and I was going, whoa, this stuff really works. I can sell this. So I signed up with it, and it was a couple of months of training and perfecting a 2.5 hour sales / reading course training program that I would do 3 times a day, 6 days a week, and then travel on the 7th day to the new city and start all over again. Probably the most difficult job I've ever had in my life. It was so grueling. You were out on your own. And the first trip was 5 weeks, and nothing was on the West Coast.
Wow.
I flew from California to Chicago, my first trip, and I ended up in Philadelphia at the end. Did 5 cities over 5 weeks, all on my own. Grueling. Was good at. I had learned from Josh how to translate that 1-to-1 influence to 1-to-many. How do you influence a room full of people? And it was a lot of what Scott had told. But like an actor on a stage, your body language, your tone of voice, all your nonverbals, instead of channeling it 1-to-1, 4 feet away, eye contact, now it's 20, 30, 40, 50 feet away across the stage. And he taught me a really important piece of behavioral science I use to this day. He taught me about Carl Jung's work about dimensions of personality, not in such an academic way. He showed me a little 4-square device where there are essentially 4 types of personality. And you're going to find these people in your rooms, and you have to have something for everyone in your room. For the really analytical people, you have to have the data, the proof, the numbers. For the achievement-oriented people, you got to show them quickly how they're going to use this to get ahead in life. For the easygoing people, you got to show them your warmth and sense of humor and your humanity, because they're buying you. They're not buying the product. For the people who crave freedom, you got to show them all the great stuff they get to do when they get the benefits of spending. And this thing worked. And I became one of the top salespeople across the country. Second trip was 10 weeks on my own out there. But after a while, I was crushing it. And instead of one-on-one, it was a room full of people. So again, I saw early success in sales, but it was all due to what I'd learned about behavioral science.
Behavioral science, right? Starting at Scott and door-to-door, teaching you, right? Figuring out somebody's why and tailoring your message specifically to them, to now you're doing 1-to-many, right? Group presentations. And the trick still is to figure out what you just said, right? This dimensions of personalities, and uniquely having a piece in your presentation to touch every individual on that personal, customized way.
Now, again, what am I, 22 years old? I again found something that it was 10 years before I would be using it full time. But that little 4-square tool he taught was something I would immerse myself in years later. I am now certified in 3 different personality assessment tools, from Myers-Briggs to DISC to the personal styles indicator. And I've gone through half a dozen others, because what he taught me in that moment was so fascinating to me, that there was a tool where I could somewhat predict someone's behavior. If I could figure out what style they were, I could change my approach to get better results from them. That blew my mind. That to me was powerful. Now to somebody else, they wouldn't care about that, because they weren't looking at how do I get what I want by getting the cooperation, collaboration of other people. I was a people person from the get-go. I just didn't know it. So to get people to help me achieve my goals by helping them achieve their goals, that was the perfect collaboration. That was perfect.
Achieve your goals by helping other people to achieve their goals.
Now, I got along the way. Now, most of my education during this time was very informal, but Scott taught me about self-improvement, and he introduced me to authors and speakers. And one of them, a guy named Zig Ziglar, a National Speakers Association Hall of Fame speaker, brilliant writer. And he would say, you can get anything you want in life if you help other people get what they want. Something like that. If you help enough people get what they want. And that was the origins of the idea of the win-win. Now, early on in the 60s and 70s, there's this idea of negotiation where, it was a win-lose thing. You outsmart your opponent, you work them into a corner, and you get the upper hand. But people like Zig, and this has been around for a while, but it was the idea that let's find out what that person needs and wants, and we match it up with what I need and want, and we find how we both get what we need and want together. And the beauty of that is, especially in selling, when you create that sort of partnership, that's the kind of thing you can go back to again. If you have a customer and they've won with you, well, you can call them again, sell them something else, because now they trust you. You're going to look after their needs. They're going to benefit from the relationship. Even if you're getting something in it too, they're getting something. And that's the basis for a longer term business relationship. And ironically, me learning these things, it'd be 10 years or more before I got into the training field. But it was in those moments early on that there are these signposts that would become important to me later on in my life. Those were both startups. Before the term startup was used, startup was really, 1980s, 90s, all about tech. Well, I was in 1970s startups that were sales-based operations. And the problem with startups and selling is that these are short-term relationships. Everywhere I went, all the customers I interacted with, it was one time only and on to the next. For a person like me who's highly social, who wants and needs those kind of long-term relationships, it was a very hard way to live. So you would get burned out in a field like that if you stayed there too long. So that's why after the second one ended, even though we built a great thing and Josh hired me to come in and recruit and train the next level of salespeople, I trained the salespeople for Scott. I trained the salespeople for Josh. So you asked me earlier, then it was kind of a natural thing. I like this better than the pressure of selling, but there was no real opportunity to do that. I didn't walk out going, I'm going to get a training job. They didn't exist. Well, that one blew up too in the end. And I moved back to the Bay Area. This time, forget the startups. I want a big company. I want a career with a big company. It's not going to go away. And it took months, but I got into Xerox, which was the Google of my day. They had the greatest technology. They created the facsimile. You could walk into a store here with a piece of paper, and they could magically send it through the airwaves to a location 1,000 miles away. They had the greatest copiers, and they had just come out with color copiers. In 1982, these things were unheard of. It took me a long time to get in there. And when I finally got in there, it was not the place for me. The line to become a manager was so long. And so much of it was just your ability to play the game and to look good and deal with the politics. And, I worked for two guys who really appreciated it. And that let me do pretty much whatever I was capable of doing. And these folks had so many rules that I barely lasted a year.
Oh, wow.
And then I needed to get out of there, and I needed to move back home, and I needed a job right away. And I continued a pattern that started early in my career, and that served me well in times of need. Whenever I was in between and I needed money now, I would go get a sales job, straight commission. Because you know what? Those are the easiest jobs to. You can get a job like that in one day. Now, you can fail the next day. They're hard jobs. And they're not jobs you're going to want to keep for a long time. But 5 or 6 times after that, when I was in between, I survived by going out and getting a direct sales commission-only job, and I can go make money until I could find that better salary position. Boy, if you had another hour, I could tell you some hilarious stories about some of the messed up things I sold, the situations I found myself. But never sat around, didn't wait for unemployment, I didn't borrow money from people. I maintained my independence by using the skills I had developed at the age of 20 or 21 when I first met Scott. After that, I ended up going out on my own, and I found a guy, and this was amazing. This guy needed someone with sales experience and speed reading experience. What are the odds of that? But he was an Australian guy running a software company in America, and on holiday, his buddy talked him into buying the Northern California franchise of the speed reading course from Australia. Oh, and it sells itself. And you'll sell it to businesses and schools. And so I walked in the door. I had exactly what he needed. I needed to get this franchise up and running. And no, it did not sell itself, not even close. And no Americans wanted something in Australian English. They're going, God, this is misspelled. There are S's here where there should be Z's. What's going on? It was a battle. And it took all of my selling skills. Now I'm not doing a one-shot close. Now it's a longer sales cycle because I'm asking companies to put up a lot more money. And it was a 3 to 6 month sales cycle. And it was corporate. I had to go in, that whole business. It 3 months to get my first account. And of all places, it was with the Oakland Police Department. But I got launched. And then I was having a hard time getting into businesses. And then I came up with the idea, let me offer this to a community college as a night course, see if they'll accept it. And I had to jump through a lot of hoops, but I got the course certified for what they call continuing education units, CEU.
Sure.
Many industries require their employees to get CEUs along the way to maintain their certification. Nurses need to do this, lots of different professions. So if you can offer a training course that has CEUs, well, then corporate employees are going to need or want those. I couldn't sell the course directly to Pacific Bell, which was a huge company at the time. But I got them to agree to put it on their program as a tuition reimbursement course. We'll just have one class. Okay. All our people are college graduates. I don't know if they need this speed reading, but we'll put it out there and they'll pay you and then we'll reimburse them if they complete it. And start with one class. And I made sure it went really, really well. And I collected testimonial letters from these people. And then I got 2 classes, and then 4 classes, and then 8 classes. And the next thing you know, I was running classes at Pacific Bell offices from Oregon to Mexico. I got them to do what they call the desk drop. They would go through a facility in an area, put a flyer on every desk in every building with my course. It was a 4-page thing with everything about my course and a sign-up thing. And again, this is before the internet. So they would cut out this piece of paper, put a check in it and mail it to me, or they would call us up and get their credit card and put it in. And this was a $275 reading course, and they were getting reimbursed. And Pacific Bell bought my first house through that.
Wow.
I could not get in the front door, but I had learned through Scott and Josh, there are other ways to get it done. You just have to be resourceful and creative. And I created a brand new model. And for the next 4 years, I rode this thing and became very successful.
Wow. The power of being resourceful there, huh? Like the clear path that was outlined to you on how to sell this now speed reading course wasn't working. What an amazing lesson for entrepreneurs is that when you run into a roadblock, it's to make a pivot, right? There's always other ways.
Absolutely. The amazing thing was we didn't have those words. I'm a baby boom. The term startup didn't come up till 2 generations later, the term entrepreneur. And we were resourceful, but now it's bootstrapping. So there's a whole culture and a language around this skill set today. But back then there wasn't, because you were supposed to follow the rules, get a job with a big company, and move up and get a pension when you were done. But I knew that wasn't for me. And I'll tell you the moment I figured this out. Through college, I was working in the warehouse of Sears, big department store. And they had a rule that men could not have facial hair. And you could tell by looking at me, I got some stuff going on here.
Yeah.
I grow a massive beard, but I'm 18, 19 years old. I want to grow a beard. They won't let me. So when I gave notice and decided to move to Lake Tahoe, I grew my first beard. And man, I was proud.
Nice.
So I'm in Tahoe looking for a job. And I go to Heavenly Valley Ski Resort because, hey, get a job, get a free ski pass. I'm going to ski. This is great. Put me in a room, give me a math test. They say, congratulations, Mr. Boyd, you qualified for any job on the mountain. So all you got to do is read the employee handbook, sign it at the end, and then we'll talk about which job you want. And on the very last page of the employee handbook was the grooming guide for men. And for minimum wage, they wanted me to stand out in a blizzard, brush snow off a chairlift for other people. And I could not have whiskers past my lip line. I could not have I would have to shave my beard to take their minimum wage job with terrible working conditions. And I turned down my first job offer. And this was something that's later in my book about negotiations. You cannot learn to negotiate if you cannot say no. And a lot of us from a young age are taught to agree. You know, parents train us in the family system. You don't get too far if you keep saying no to your parents. And in school, they don't want to hear no from you. They want you to sit still, behave, turn your stuff in on time. No, in this culture, is not going to get you ahead. Yet, most adults get to a point where their biggest failing is their inability to say no.
Aram, you know what I heard last week, just an interesting piece here, is that what we were taught as kids, the rules, does not serve us as adults, right? So we have to work to shed this, and saying no is a perfect example of this.
This is what growing up is about. Succeed in that system. The family, the school, yes, you need to do those things. But to succeed as an adult, it's a completely different set of rules, requires a different mindset, requires a different skill set. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to learn all this stuff in the classroom. You're going to learn important things in the classroom, but then you have to go out and get those life lessons. Take what you learned in the classroom, the ability to speak and write and calculate really well. Those things are crucially important, but it's those other skills, especially when it comes, that are going to win it for you or not. And there's nothing wrong with being an employee. I know a lot of people have had very successful lives and made plenty of money. They have that security. But from an early age, I knew freedom was more important to me than security. Both Josh and Scott figured that out instantly with me. And they constantly fed me opportunities that allowed me to expand my freedom by being better at my craft so I could sell more, close more sales, make more money, and then buy all the freedom I want. Both of them understood I wasn't in it to buy a fancy car. I wasn't in it for status. I was in it for my personal freedom. And that came from, again, understanding the personalities, dimensions of personality that Jung had outlined in his book, The Psychology of Personality.
Dimensions of personality. Yeah.
Great parts. They knew this very well, although neither one of them came off as professors, but that's how they motivated me. And that's why I followed them all over, because a good leader gets the greatest discretionary effort from their followers, meaning that everyone will do a certain amount because they're getting paid. As George Carlin once said, most companies pay just enough money for you not to quit, and most employees work just hard enough not to get fired. Actually, I consider it backwards, but that's kind of corporate life. But if you want to do more and make as much as you're worth, well, then you have to be more of a risk taker. And that's the mentality that these two guys were looking to groom in people. And people who showed up for an interview who were security minded, they didn't work well. That was one of the other dimensions of personality that didn't work well. So again, you go with those 4 dimensions. My style was what they're looking for. And the one next to it, that achievement-oriented one, those are the 2 they needed. They happen to be the most extroverted one, the most assertive ones. The ones who just want to follow the rules, that's not the field for you. Go into a field where there's one right answer to the question. And ironically, that's how I was as a student. I avoided those courses, STEM, science, technology, engineering, math.
Yeah.
All those courses have one right answer. I found out that was a little constraining for me. I was good at the courses where you created your own answer and then you were graded on how you defended it, on your eloquence, on your insightfulness. I was good at the qualitative courses, not the quantitative courses. Completely different world. So here I am today. I have no technical background, not a technical bone in my body, but most of my clients work in tech because I have something they don't have. They need that people side of the equation because they went all through college excelling at the courses with the one right answer. And now they're leaders, business. There's no one right answer. And now they have to work on the skills that they didn't develop early on because nobody wanted those. To be right, know how to create this image on the screen by putting the right combination of letters in the code. That's what it was for them. Now they're in a situation they're asked to be leaders and they're confounded because these people aren't doing what I want them to do. And I'm trying to treat them all equally. And that's when you find out if you treat them the same, you're not treating them equal. If you treat them according to what their personality style is, what their needs and wants and desires are, you will get the best from them. And your goal is discretionary effort. I wandered away from this, but there's a minimum everyone has to produce in order to stay employed. Your job as a leader is to get as far above that minimum effort as you can, called discretionary effort. And great leaders, people in my life, Scott and Josh, they got so much more from me. They get commitment. So when the leader's not there, the employee still chases after the principle, the ideal. They follow the lead of the leader, even when the leader's not there. Now, in the other world, if people are not motivated by their own intrinsic desires, they're extrinsically motivated. The minute the leader's not there, what do they say? When the cat's away, the mice will play. All hell breaks loose when the leader's not there. But people like me, I didn't need that. I had the ultimate goal. That was my freedom. The money I would get by closing these sales would give me that freedom. So I was the model person for what they were looking for. But in the corporate world, I didn't always fit in. They didn't want to give me freedom.
We have to find our own unique paths, right? And like some people that like more rules, great, you go more that corporate direction, and others that like to make their own rules and be more of that qualitative thinking versus the quantitative, go more the entrepreneurship route. Aram, talk to us now, as we're slowly running out of time, all of this sales and influence and behavioral science experience that you have, what are you working on today?
Well, here's the interesting thing about it. My path was so windy early on. I didn't get to that plateau where I could see the view for quite a while. For a short while, when I ran that guy's speed reading company, I was doing training, but it was still, again, mostly selling. And I interviewed for training positions, couldn't get. So it took me going independent for quite a while, moving to Japan, teaching English and doing weddings for 2.5 years, coming back, working in public transportation in a marketing role before I had a chance at a full-time role and happened to be teaching leadership as a trainer. And at that point, I had enough things in my background that I could present a resume where I was qualified to lead leaders. But this is 40 years later. And I had eventually gone back to school and I got a degree in instructional design and training. Now, they still weren't really offering those degrees, but I'd had a bunch of college and I went to a degree completion program. I got to craft my own degree. So when I applied for the senior leadership trainer position, I fit all the qualifications they were looking for. And this was rare. This rarely happened to me in my life. So that started me full-time focusing on helping people become better leaders. And amazingly, all of that work in my youth came to play. All those lessons I learned on the front porch of someone's house, or on the way traveling to a college, or failing in corporate sales at Xerox, or trying to get people to buy speed reading for a corporation. All of those experiences, including my time in Japan, all of those allowed me to get people to stop, open up their minds for a while, see a better example, practice a new skill, stumble through it until they change the way they work so they can get better results. Because ultimately, my career has been about changing my behavior to get better results from other people.
Nice.
And that's what I teach people to do. When I'm doing one-on-one coaching, I teach these leaders how to adjust their behavior for the needs of the people based on the behavioral science to get better results from those people. When I'm working with groups, I'm doing the same thing. I have something for everyone in how I present my material. I have all four dimensions of personality covered in the material. And mostly what I've learned is when you're dealing with adults, the Socratic method is the most valuable tool you have. As children, the process is like you mentioned, they're told what to do. You follow the rules, do what you're told. But when you're dealing with adults, you don't tell them what to do. It's them what to do. So what I do today, I get coaching clients, executives, and I ask them, well, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are the difficulties you're having? And in almost every case, I trace it back to something in behavioral science they can use to adjust their behavior to get better results with the other people. So I do that
Adjust
one-on-one.
your behavior to get better results from the other people.
Because I've never found any other way that works. Yes, you can threaten people. You can threaten to fire them to get them to do what you want. Yes, you can entice them and throw money at them. But ultimately, the thing that Scott and Josh were great at, they found out what was inside of me, and they used intrinsic motivation. The thing inside of me that I wanted, they used that. Throwing money at someone or throwing fear at them, that's extrinsic motivation. And that works really well in short spurts. But it's the intrinsic motivation that works over the long term. And using the Socratic method by asking rather than telling, get people to do their own thinking for them, have them come up with the answer, and then finding out how to motivate them intrinsically. That's what I do with individuals, with groups. And that's what the book was all about. I was working as a senior leadership instructor, had a very nice salary. And one day I got a call to do an all hands meeting for the finance group. I was to MC an 8-hour long day program. They were bringing in a speaker. This is an author who had this book. So he came in for 1 hour, had a slide presentation. It was a perfectly nice book, but it wasn't ground shaking. My job then was to take all of his material, create activities and exercises to build the skills within the people. This guy told them the stuff. I took the stuff, the ideas, I turned it into activities, exercises, role plays, so that people would begin to turn it into skill. I got my salaried rate for the day. That guy flew in. He had lunch with me, got a free lunch. He worked for an hour and he made $15,000.
Oh, wow.
And the only difference between that guy and me,
He had a book.
he was a published author. Now, he was full of hustle. He knew how to do it.
Sure.
And this was back before self-publishing was a huge deal. I go, how'd you get an agent? Did you get an agent? How'd you get a publisher? And he said, well, I'll tell you the truth. See that publishing company there? Yeah, I'm the owner of that publishing company. He created his own publishing company so that when he had called on a company, he's amazing. Well, now anyone can do this. Yeah, upload a manuscript to Amazon or there's half a dozen other platforms. You can have your book customized. It was a powerful lesson. Now, I had security in that moment. I had a good salary, 6-figure salary with full benefits and retirement, pension, coverage, health coverage for my family. So that worked for me, but I saw the future. And I said, I need to be doing what he's doing. I need to be a keynote speaker. And to do that, I'm going to need a book. So down the line, now, it might take me 5 more years, but down the line, I hope we'll get to talk about how I went from where I am today to becoming a highly sought after keynote speaker.
I mean, Aram, I see it happening completely, right? Because of what you're doing right now, teaching strategic leadership, right? Being an author, sharing your story, it is simply just the process. The journey that you're on is towards becoming a very sought after keynote speaker, right? And it's not like you've never done this before already. It's just in a different medium, a small pivot, huh?
It is. To me, it feels a little big because I haven't booked that thing yet.
Sure.
But you said a word, and I'm kind of shocked I haven't used that word at all so far. But the reason strategic is part of my company name, AB Strategic Leadership, is because from a young age, I realized that being strategic was one of the most valuable skills in navigating a path. And strategic, in my point, really has to do with how you deal with other people. Not so much resources, but that too. You need to stay out of debt. You need to invest your money in things that produce a return. Don't rack up credit card bills, because as friend Damian Mason says, debt kills creativity. So the freedom I craved meant I had to have enough money so I could walk away from any opportunity that didn't suit. And I did. There are many times I said no, and I said, nope, I'm out of here. And I never was a wage slave. I never was beholden to someone's abusive relationship because I handled that money part. I was strategic in how I dealt with people. But being strategic with people, again, that's what I do all day, using behavioral science to get the best results from people by adjusting my behavior. So yeah, it's about being strategic.
It's about being strategic. Thank you for sharing your story with us, right? Your whole journey. And I'm always curious, right? So now we can see what your future is starting to hold, right? Where you're going. You're teaching leadership inside of corporations to individuals as well. You're moving towards being a keynote speaker. And then along the theme of legacy always, right? Let's think down the line. I'm curious what it means to you in 50 years from now, 100 years from now. If your name is spoken around a table, what do you hope that they're going to say about you?
Well, this is what I discovered when that first job with Scott. He taught me about self-help, and there were authors and speakers that would feed you to withstand the rejection. You had to feed yourself positive messages. And some of the messages were how to sell. Others were how to be motivated, how to move forward. So these people like Zig Ziglar and J. Douglas Edwards and Og Mandino, those were my teachers during those years where I had dropped out of college. And their wisdom and their inspiration propelled me in so many different ways. When I think of legacy, I think of the things those people created. Because a book, at that time it was a tape set. Now everything is, became CDs, and now it's all streaming. But that content, again, we didn't have a term content creator, but the people who create content have legacy that will outlast them. Now, Og Mandino was a Hall of Fame speaker with the National Speakers Association. Had I joined earlier in my career, I would have been able to meet him at the annual convention. But he passed away before I could. He was one of my favorite authors. But his legacy is now, I don't need to know him. I've got a dozen titles. Everyone is solid gold. And when any of you find an author you like that speaks to you, where their content resonates in you, fine. You go and you enjoy their work and you devour it. To me, that's what a legacy is. And I struggle with this for so long because I was not creating. And I finally made a commitment. I'd been writing over the years, but not in an organized way. And I never got anything published. And when I tore my patellar tendon and I had a lot of bone chips in my ankle and I had to have 2 surgeons operate on my ankle and knee in the same day, and I was laid up for 9 weeks, that's when I said, okay, this is where I start my writing career for real. And I started a blog. I didn't know what I was going to write about, but the reason for the blog was to get good at writing, come up with the idea for writing a book, And it took a few years, but that's exactly how it happened. And that was the path I took. I made a commitment to write every week, at least 500 words published by midnight every Thursday, no matter what. And for 2.5 years, I did that. And along the way, I came up with the idea for the book. And that took quite a while. So to me, legacy is you reach the hearts and minds of people. They remember you mostly, and it's not your brilliance. More often, it's your kindness that people remember. How you helped them, how you mentored them, how you showed them grace at important moments where they needed a little help, they needed a little slack, how you pulled and pushed them to be more than what they were at the time, how you believed in them. And then from there, creating something that will be there when you're gone. A book, a play, a video, a movie. In this modern world, I think it does at some point come to content creation because it's really rare. And again, Socrates was the rarest of the rare. That man never published a paper, but he's the only public figure I can think of who has created tremendous legacy. You know, he's father of modern teaching. He's father of logic and ethics. You know, he taught Aristotle, all these people. But he's the only one I know of that didn't leave a paper trail. And even though your trail might be on TikTok, it might be streaming in video and other media. And it's going to change. Teddy Roosevelt said this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So the people you will remember in your life are the people who touch your life the way Scott and Josh touched mine. They cared about me first. They learned about who I was and what I wanted, and then they created opportunities to fit that. And the reason I stay with both of them, while we churn through lots of other people. Straight commission, it's a constant revolving door of people coming and going. Very few actually make it. But I stayed because they both fed me. They gave me validation I needed. They valued me. And you value someone by giving them opportunity, by giving them responsibility. They asked me to train their people. That was the first step. With Scott and Jim, I never got paid for that. But later, I got a commission override on everything those people sold. Josh hired me to come into the office between tours, and he paid me a salary to recruit and train the other people. But it was decades later. I was in my early 20s when I first started figuring out training as a place. And I was 55, I think, when I got my full-time leadership training position. So your path could be narrow and windy and full of surprises, pleasant and unpleasant. But if you're true to yourself, you keep learning, you keep trying, and you figure it out for yourself instead of waiting for someone to tell you, you will eventually come to a vista and below you will be something magnificent. Sorry, I get off on metaphors. What can I tell you?
I love that. I love that. I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. I so appreciate you being here, sharing with your story. If you want to learn more, where's the best place for them to go to?
You can find Working in Harmony by Aram Boyd, 5 Vital Skills to Raise Your Team's Performance. It's up on Amazon right now. Type in my name or Working in Harmony. It's also going up on a platform where you can go to your librarian or bookstore owner and ask them to order it. It'll be available to bookstores and libraries shortly. Or you can give me a call. My phone number is 925-680. You spell Aram on your phone by dialing 2726. Give me a call, aramboyd@gmail.com. I'm one of those people, I will take your call because I have found much greater success and warmth and appreciation in my life through people.
There you have it, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. Please come and share with us your biggest takeaways. Some stuff that I pulled out and noted down was about influence in sales. Of course, Aram talks so much about personalization to whomever you're speaking to, working with, whoever you're strategically leading. A big takeaway was using emotion over logic in sales. The power of saying no, not to threaten people or give them just money motivation, right? Using intrinsic versus extrinsic value. And then, of course, Aram's look at the true definition of, one, being strategic, and then two, legacy, of how it is really who you impact in your life, and as well as the actual things you create. Every one of you want a really long-lasting legacy. Make sure that you're creating, whether it is writing a book like Aram, whether it's a podcast like myself, creating videos, online courses. Start documenting what you're doing, not for yourself, but for your kids, your grandkids, for the potential billions of people in the future that can learn from your story and your knowledge. Thank you so much for being here today. Greatly appreciate it. Please go visit Aram. You can see all the links down below, and come check us out over at journeytolegacy.org. Until next time, my name is Wayne Veldsman, and you've been listening to Journey to Legacy.